Okay, so first league, I'm going to be recording since the big banning, Uro, Field of the Dead, Tybalt's Trickery, Valky, Tybalt's Rule Change, the big shake up. Yeah, and the plan is that this is basically, I guess, where my videos are going to get caught up to what's going on now. I think my videos are still stuck somewhere in like December or something. I've still got some recorded videos. I don't know. Those might just those might just kind of fall to the wayside. I mean, I guess I've got them like if I absolutely can't upload anything else. But yeah, I thought I definitely get asked, when videos post ban are going to start going up. So I'm able to record something now. So let's run this through a league and let's see how it does. So this is the most recent version that I've played. It's very back to basics. It's playing Obosh the Preypiercer. Can't really go wrong. Can't really go wrong with Obosh. And main deck Blood Moon. Main deck Blood Moon is not necessarily like guaranteed to be as good as it was when about a third of the decks you'd play were Uro decks. On the other hand, Blood Moon is still pretty good against a lot of decks, even if it's not necessarily an auto win. Also, even against Uro, like I think it was good, but the Uro decks were not necessarily auto wins. Because the thing is, yeah, a lot of times if you stuck a Blood Moon game 1, it was an auto win. But first of all, in games 2 and 3, they always had Aether Gust or other answers. Sometimes they even had them in the main deck. Sometimes they could always force a negation it in game 1. Yeah. Anyway, long story short. Yeah, the fact of the matter is that the decks that Blood Moon is good against usually are not necessarily auto wins anymore. But those decks also don't necessarily just completely run away with the game if you don't resolve a Blood Moon. So I guess that's the trade-off. But I am doing something a little bit different with this deck that I haven't quite done before, and that is I'm playing effectively 24 lands. Technically, I'm playing 16 lands, but I'm playing 8 spell lands. And yeah, so basically the idea is that Spikefield Hazzard is taking the spot that Lava Dart would have in a lot of previous lists. Also, I'm back to playing, I guess 16 creatures this time. This is definitely a little bit on the more creature light side compared to other versions I've played in the past. But yeah, I guess in some previous versions I would have played like say Bomat Courier instead of the Spikefield Hazzard. Or I guess I would have played Bomat Courier instead of Flame Slash, and then like Spikefield Hazzard would be Lava Dart. But yeah, the thing is I think Spikefield Hazzard is actually just better than Lava Dart for the most part. At least now that the format got slowed down with the banning of Simian Spirit Guide and Tybalt's Trickery and the Valky rule chain. Since the format's a little bit slower, I think being able to hit my land drops is typically more valuable than getting another use out of a Lava Dart effect later on. And actually, the thing is, I actually end up playing this as a land probably the majority of the time. But, I do actually play it as a Lava Dart effect, maybe like a third, maybe like between a quarter and a third of the time. We'll see. We'll see if it comes up. But it almost makes me wonder if I should just play more mountains, but probably not, because the thing is when I usually do use it as a Lava Dart effect, it's probably actually influencing the game quite a bit. Like it's either killing a creature, or it's turning on Light Up the Stage, or it's like sending a Kroxa to the graveyard that actually has come up, or rather exiling it so it doesn't go to the graveyard, or dealing with a Wormcoil Engine outright so it doesn't get tokens. There's actually quite a bit you can do with this, and when it does come up, it is quite valuable. Lava Dart was obviously good enough, and yeah, it is kind of nice that this can also be a land. Very nice, actually. Yeah, I mean, the rest is self-explanatory. Firebolt. I don't see myself ever going away from this. I tried like one league playing Burst Lightning instead, and that was just I just couldn't. I mean, like I just ended up seeing a bunch of Burst Lightnings in the graveyard, and later in the game there's two toughness or less creatures I wanted to kill, or sometimes I just wanted to pump my team. Just I had a bunch of open mana, I had a bunch of prowess dudes, I had nothing to do, I couldn't pump my team. It was just not nice. So Yeah, Flame Firebolt is just very good. I mean, if it was an instant, it'd be perfect. I think it'd be even better than Lightning Bolt in this deck, to be honest, if it was an instant. But you know, it being Sorcery Suit is a small price to pay for being able to get 2 uses out of this card, 4 damage total. Yeah, it's just I love it. I fell in love with this card way back in Odyssey, and I don't see myself falling out of love with it anytime soon. Flame Slash, you know, Is It Prowess is still running around. That's the main reason why I'm playing this. If the format if Is It Prowess ever disappears and Storming Entities ever not a thing again, I might be able to get away from this, but there's actually 2 reasons why I'm playing Flame Slash in the main again. Is It Prowess because, honestly, Is It Prowess actually, I think we have a favorable matchup as long as we're packing Flame Slashes. I'm not so sure, actually, without Flame Slashes, and mainly it's because of Storming Entity. We really can deal with most of the rest of the threats pretty easily, and then we usually have a better late game with our Pyromancers, Bonecrushers, and I guess this, yeah, and I guess they play a lot up to stage 2. I guess our Firebolt's also like our card advantage. They don't really play a burn spell that generates card advantage. They could place the Burst Lightnings with Firebolts, and honestly, I think they probably should. I think people just assume I'm like, I don't know, I'm crazy or something, but like, it is better. And they probably should play Firebolt instead of Burst Lightning. But then again, I mean, I don't know. They do play some counter magic sometimes. I don't know. Probably Firebolt's just better. But anyway, yeah. So Flame Slash. Yeah, got to deal with Storming Entity. That's really how Is It Prowess usually runs away with the game. If they run away with the game, we usually have an advantage of the late game. But if they have a 3/3 flying Prowess creature, sometimes you just can't deal with that. Flame Slash obviously usually can. Sometimes if they have multiple mutagenic growths, you can't even deal with it, but that's definitely the exception rather than rule. And also there's that Archon, the 3-mana 2/3 flying Archon creature that makes it so that each player can only play 1 spell each turn, and by the way makes your non-basic lands come into play tapped. Don't forget about that. That comes up with Blast Zone, actually. These lands come into play tapped regardless, although under a Blood Moon, remember, they'll come into play tapped even under a Blood Moon because of the Archon. Anyway, but yeah, that Archon creature is really annoying because, yeah, I mean, it's not like this deck needs to play 2 spells each turn, but it's that usually the decks that play Archon usually have Aether Vial, so usually they're not really affected much at all by the 1 card per turn limitation. But so yeah, if they're playing multiple spells per turn using Aether Vial, and we're only playing 1 spell each turn, that's one way they can really kind of pull ahead, and it becomes quite a problem. Plus, you can't actually combine other burn spells to deal with the Archon because you can only play 1 each turn. So, you know, Flame Slash it is. It's not perfect. Also, we can't play Shatter Skull Smashing if we're playing Obosh, so we don't have access to a huge, powerful burn spell. So I guess we gotta play it in the form of just an actual spell instead of using our land to deal with it. Also, no more Soulfire Immolator, so we can't exactly rely on that either for Archon duty. That was one innovation I played actually in part to get away from Flame Slash, but I think I ended up started playing Flame Slash towards the end, even in my Immolator build. So that's just where like a 4 damage burn spell is just very valuable in the meta right now. You know, Titan decks are still a thing. Dread of the Elysian Grove still needs to be dealt with. Yeah, Swiftspear and Soulscar. Really nothing much to say here. I've really been messing around with the 2-drop Prowess creatures quite a bit. But you know, back to basics. These 1-drops are just very efficient, very good. Especially if we're playing Obosh, we can't do any better than these. It is actually interesting that like if somehow I could play Obosh with the 2-drop creatures, like obviously you can't, but I mean like if hypothetically Obosh had some type of different restriction, and I could play the exact same 75 but play Abbott and Immolator, I might actually play Abbott and Immolator because actually I've been so impressed with them. So very surprisingly impressed. But I guess we don't have to live in that hypothetical universe because they do conflict with Obosh, and I have really been liking Obosh again. It's very, very powerful, and it's basically something that I can always do with extra mana late in the game. Makes my Firebolts way more powerful as long as I can untap. Having 4 damage in the graveyard for, 2 damage for 5 mana might seem inefficient. It's not, I mean, since you already got 2 damage out of it to begin with, but I'll tell you what, 4 damage for 5 mana, still might be a little inefficient, but it's got a lot more punch, and I'll tell you that much. Plus other burn spells, of course. Yeah, and that takes us to Spikefield Hazzard, which I've already kind of discussed. I guess I'll just briefly say that I really do like how having access to 24 lands up to 24 lands if I play the spell lands as lands, is that it's never been easier to curve out into Obosh mana, and in some matchups that's huge, like red-green Ponza, for example. Basically, Obosh is the game plan to beat red-green Ponza. No other version of this deck has as good of a matchup against red-green Ponza as Obosh versions, because they have to play 2 burn spells to deal with Obosh. Unless they play like Roast or like that Delve burn spell, I forget what it's called, Magmatic Sinkhole or something, which typically they don't. I don't think the Magmatic Sinkhole typically works. It also conflicts with Klothys. Yeah, anyway, there are options available, but they typically also play Flame Slash as their like big damage creature burn spell of choice. That means they will have to burn 2 burn spells on Obosh if they can kill it. Which is good. Which is like, even if they do, the fact that they have to 2-for-1 themselves to essentially deal with an 8th card, it was Obosh's card advantage without us even having to play a spell. But but ideally they won't deal with it at all, and if they don't, then it literally just runs away with the game, and that's kind of how it is actually in a number of matchups. But green-red Ponza is definitely the best example. I mean, it's harder to resolve, but like if you resolve this against Blue Moon too, basically any deck that relies on burn spells to deal with creatures, Obosh is going to be at its premium there. Blood Moon, like I explained, still good. One thing I particularly like about Blood Moon in this deck is with a Blood Moon out, your Spikefield Hazards and Valakut Awakenings are basically almost strictly superior lands because they come into play untapped and their spells if you need them. Bonecrusher Giant, not much to say there. Good as ever. Light up the stage. A funny story. And actually, if the format really gets grindy, I might try this again. I was actually trying what's it called? Mazemind Tome Mazemind Tome for a while instead of Light Up the Stage. Man, let me tell you, against Jund, oof, ouch. Mazemind Tome, just pure card advantage. You can just keep gaining card advantage every turn. Man, I'm actually really tempted to try that here. I probably shouldn't. Man, I'm actually tempted. No. Maybe next time. I do like the life gain though, I gotta say, especially since burn is becoming more and more of a thing. But I've actually found that you almost, when you beat burn, you almost always end up beating them by racing rather than waiting for a Mazemind Tomb to gain you 4 life. The problem is you almost always spend the first few turns dealing with their creatures anyway, and then quickly trying to like kill them. That the reality is you almost never get the chance to play Mazemind Tomb. Yeah, so I think Light Up the Stage it is. We're going to stick with this list, but I actually really tempted to... Oh, no, what am I saying? I'm playing the Obosh version. Silly me. Well, I'm not going to redo this because I'm already like 14 minutes in, but yeah, silly me. I would have to go back to a Giganta version or a companionless version. I may actually try a Giganta version again because that's neither here nor there. Now, you know what? Fellow Twitter user and streamer... well, actually, I don't stream yet, but hopefully I will soon. Not too distant future. But anyways, Stickball Russ on Twitter definitely got me back in the right direction to play Obosh. I'm not gonna abandon it just yet. Why not? Why fix what's working? Definitely, this is bringing me back into the positive. So, yeah, Light Up the Stage it is. Doesn't conflict with Obosh. Yeah, so that's obviously our best bet. Valakut Awakening. This could be Forgotten Cave, but I actually like Valakut Awakening slightly more. The reality is, actually, I think most of the time you probably should be playing your Forgotten Caves as lands. They're a lot more tempting, though, to cycle, and actually in this deck where you have Spikefield Hazzard, as a card that will be a land most of the time anyway, I could definitely see the merit to playing Forgotten Cave, and I have played Forgotten Cave for a while, but I actually like Valakut's Awakening more for one simple reason. In not every matchup, Flame Slash or Blood Moon will be live cards. Sometimes also Spikefield Hazard. Spikefield Hazard or other lands will be kind of lackluster. Sometimes also, like against certain matchups like humans, you don't really want more prowess creatures. So sometimes Sometimes you might end up getting like a couple of them stuck in your hand because of a Reflector Mage or something, and then Valakut Awakening might just sort of cash them in for more burn spells, which is what you really need in the Humans matchup, and then just let Obosh take over. Actually, in the Humans matchup, you're fine. You're fine without ever like playing a creature. Basically, you could basically play no creatures and just play control, and then just try to win with Obosh. You could really do that, and that's probably. If I had more burn spells, that I could bring in, that would be probably the strategy, realistically. Or I guess also Bonecrusher Giant. You probably don't even need Seasoned Pyromancer, but anyway. That's neither here nor there. The point is, Valakut Awakening, very useful because Blood Moon and Flame Slash, in particular, are not actually live cards in every single game. I still think they're good enough to main deck. I think if you think of them as sideboard cards, which I don't think they're quite sideboard cards, but even if you do, I'd still probably play them main. Simply because I feel like I need the sideboard cards that I'm playing in the sideboard slot, and it would be worth it to just to just have access to this 75. So yeah, it's just a small price to pay to be able to filter some cards that might be dead at certain matchups. One important thing to keep in mind about Valakut is that as long as you're playing Valakut, always hold at least one mountain in your hand. And so far, I could be wrong about this. This might not be the best way to go about it, but my general rule of thumb is I always keep one mountain in my hand at all times. I don't play out empty-handed. I don't go hellbent, which is really what you should be doing for the most part, and that's usually what I do. I think in Merfolk at least. I don't even know actually, because sometimes that deck, I could be mistaken. I'm not thinking about Merfolk right now. I'm thinking about Prowess. Yeah, you really want to be holding at least one mountain in your hand at all times, because if you draw a Valakut Awakening, then you can cash that in. But if you draw whatever kind of spell, like basically, if you draw a Seasoned Pyromancer, you want to be able to play that last mountain, draw 2 cards, without having to discard it. But if you draw Valakut Awakening, you can cash in that mountain, draw 2 cards instead of just one if it was Forgotten Cave, or just one Valakut, or just one from Valakut itself. Yeah, and that takes us to Seasoned Pyromancer. Of course, there's not much to say here. Just, again, you do want to always be 1 land away from Hellbend. Always keep at least one, always keep about, you usually don't want to keep more than 1 mountain in your hand, because it's really bad if you have to ditch mountains to this thing. But yeah, I mean, not much to say about Seasoned Pyromancer that hasn't already been said. It really, I may want to try that Phoenix. There's actually a Phoenix that was recommended to me, but the thing I like about Seasoned Pyromancer, though, and the main reason why I can't really get away from it, because honestly, I might even prefer Giganta build if it's not for Seasoned Pyromancer. But one of the main reasons I like Seasoned Pyromancer is just that the tokens that it makes are just so good in the Jund and Shadow matchups. It's won me so many games just by being able to buy me time while I either assemble enough burn spells to kill like a big creature, or prepare a big counterattack or something. Also like being able to flash it back from the graveyard, or I guess the Phoenix kind of has that, the new one. Or I should say the one from Theros with Escape. But yeah, I mean, there's not much else. I don't know what else to say. Just it's also it helps us hit our land drops by ditching cards that aren't otherwise live. Of particular note, actually, that's nice about playing spell lands instead of, say, Forgotten Cave, is that if you pitch a spell land, you will get tokens, because of course, as we all know now, when it's not in play, it counts as the front half, the spell half. So yeah, that's always nice. There will be a number of times you end up pitching these spell lands, and that's pretty nice, because then you get tokens from them, unlike an actual land. So, takes us to the sideboard. For Shattering Sprees, I get asked this a lot, like why I'm playing this. I don't know what meta you guys play in, but yeah, you don't always run into decks like E-Tron, or Hammer Time, or Hardened Scales, or Death and Taxes, or or Tron, regular Tron, or Dice Factory, or or any deck playing Stoneforge Mystic. I don't know though. I mean, I don't know what universe you guys are playing, but in the one I'm playing, I mean, you do run into decks like that, and even if they're not necessarily the top deck, I mean, there's almost always at least one game in a league that somebody's going to be playing one of those decks. And honestly, Shattering Spree is the best option against anything that is playing artifacts. If you actually need to deal with artifacts, Shattering Spree is the best, hands down, the best artifact destruction spell we can be playing in an Obosh build. I do play Pillage sometimes in this spot, and I might be playing Pillage. I'll get to the reason why in a second, but it has to do with having enough cards to board out the Blood Moons and the Flame Slashes for. But since I do have Relic and Blast Zone in this version, which are kind of like both of these can be kind of like, they're never dead because this is always at least a land, a colorless land, and this is actually always at least a 2-mana spread over 2 turns draw spell. So since I don't actually need to like have like a sort of evergreen kind of card that I can bring in basically any matchup, yeah, I think Shattering Spree is where we want to be really for like dealing with any artifacts. Like take Stoneforge decks for example, like especially any Stoneforge deck with blue, especially like also Bant Stoneblade I think is probably the biggest defender right now, or Bant Squirrel Blade because now they're playing that annoying squirrel creature, which is one reason it's nice to be back on Soulscar Mage because that gets around indestructible, but because 1/1 counters, they'll kill an indestructible creature, -1, -1 I mean, anyway, Shattering Spree, not much to say other than, yeah, I mean, against like any Stoneforge deck that's packing blue, you want to at least replicate it once if you can, because it's very unlikely they'll be able to play 2 Force Negations to counter both the Shattering Spree and the copy. Yeah, whereas if you paid 3 mana for Pillage, that's the juiciest Force Negation ever. Yeah, but Shattering Spree, you can even kick it more times or replicate it more times if you have more mana you can't use. If you replicate it like 3 times, then like, I mean, they basically have to have a full grip and have like 3 Force Negations and 3 blue spells to pitch and actually have it not cripple them so badly. It's just not going to happen. Like, if you replicate it 3 times, it's basically uncounterable. So yeah, I mean, there's that. Obviously, all those other decks I mentioned, they play multiple artifacts usually, so you can usually nab more than one. It's also very good against Regulatron, and actually it is good against Humans and Spirits. Humans and Spirits is because Aether Vial, and you might see this come up, but like we do want to bring these in against Aether Vial decks. I know. First of all, any Aether Vial deck, including Spirits, by the way, can play Chalice of the Void. Yes, Spirits can play Chalice of the Void. Yes, they do play Noble Hierarch and what's that card called? Mausoleum Wanderer. Well, Mausoleum Wanderer they can usually play under a Cavern of Souls anyway, so not a biggie for them. Noble Hierarch, but I mean usually Noble Hierarch if they don't play it early in the game anyway, it's not really at its best anyway. So kind of like how in Merfolk, or like with Aether Vial, it's not that as big of a deal as you might think. I don't see it usually in Spirits, but in theory, Spirits could play Chalice of the Void. Chalice of the Void, definitely I've seen in Humans, but probably only about like 1/4 to 1/5 of Humans decks I've actually seen packing it. But yeah, anyway. So, alright, 1 second, let me just see. Sorry, give me 1 second. Okay, excuse me. See, this is one reason it's been hard for me to record, is little interruptions. Hopefully this one didn't ruin the whole video, but I just got to record something, otherwise I'm not gonna have anything up to date to post for this coming week. But anyway, yeah, you do want to bring this in against Humans and Spirits because one of the only ways you lose those matchups is Aether Vial, and you can always pitch them. This is another reason why I like Valakut Awakening. You can feel more free to bring in cards that may be dead, but are very, very useful if you do see them. And being able to deal with any number of copies of Aether Vial are very strong, especially in Humans because... oh, and Goblins, actually. Goblins always does play Chalice, but my point is any Aether Vial deck, in theory, can basically play Chalice. And it's also nice that, it's good enough, in my opinion, to bring in just to deal with Aether Vial, because that's just one of their best ways to overwhelm your removal, force you to play at instant speed and all this other nonsense. But also, if they bring in Chalice, you're less vulnerable to it, and you can do this more freely because you can pitch it with Valakut and with Seasoned Pyromancer. Very nice, in my opinion. It's also very good against even Greentron. First of all, you can hit a expedition map or even a star. I mean, a chromatic sphere or star. Sphere is obviously better because they won't draw a card, but sometimes it's even correct to hit a star. I would say usually it is. I mean, maybe more. Anyway, just seriously consider if you have Shattering Spree in your hand and they played a star, especially if you have a Blood Moon or something else. It is a very powerful turn 3 play. Or if you can win by turn 3 otherwise, because usually you will prevent them from getting turn 3 Tron if you turn off their ability to play a turn 2 Sylvan Scrying, which they would need a first turn star in order to be able to make happen, Star Sphere. So yeah, anyway, so a very surprisingly useful card with more uses than you might think. Kozilek's Return is for pro-red creatures and for token Swarm and for small creature Swarm like elves. Very useful, I don't know what else to say. Also against burn, you need to be able to deal with the core Firewalkers. And it's also very nice as a 2-of. Like it's one of these cards, and in the matchups where it's good, if you almost anytime you draw it, sometimes they can rack up more, 2 toughness creatures. I mean, we've seen it before. We know what it does. Mainly, yeah, it deals with swarms of 2 toughness or less creatures, and it deals with pro-red creatures. Most importantly, Blast Zone. I probably get asked about Blast Zone the second most, other than Shattering Spree. Long story short, Blast Zone, it's very good against Death Shadow decks because no matter how large they are, you can just deal with them outright. Also, it deals with enchantments like a Shaper Sanctuary from Elves. There might be other enchantments too, or like Hardened Scales, or most importantly, Sigarda's Aid. That's actually huge. Because you can deal with both Hammer and Sigarda's Aid at once with this, so it's great against Hammer Time. Yeah, it's also, I mean, like, you kind of need it. It's also just good against most decks with Aether Vial and most white decks that can play Auriok Champion. Being able to deal with pro-red creatures. I mean, having more ways to deal with pro-red creatures than just Kozilek's Return is definitely nice. But another nice thing about Blast Zone, I mean, and also can deal with Tarmogoyf, of course. Any large creature that basically is larger than its converted mana cost, Blast Zone is going to be definitely a nice addition. It's also nice against, like I said, decks like humans and Aether Vial decks. Being able to sweep away Aether Vial plus other 1-drop creatures like all at once when you hit 4 mana, because you need 3 and this to crack this. That can just be very nice. But another nice thing about Blast Zone is actually it's easier to. I mean, I would probably play Ratchet Bomb instead of this if I had access to Ratchet Bomb, and it wouldn't conflict with Obosh. But one nice thing about Blast Zone that you don't necessarily get with Ratchet Bomb that I actually kind of forgot about is you can actually side out lands for this. Now, actually, in the past, I usually ended up siding out spells because the problem is mathematically speaking, I mean, this was kind of a rule of thumb I remember way back, believe it or not, I used to play Control. Yes, I know, that was in a different life. I'm reformed since then. But, a good rule of thumb, because I think it was Randy Buehler who said that if you want to hit, it probably wasn't just Randy Buehler, but it was kind of a common rule of thumb back in the day that you needed at least 18 islands in order to be able to consistently cast Counterspell by turn 2, meaning essentially you needed 18 sources of colored mana to play, to have 2 of that colored source by turn 2, which means essentially if we want to have 2 red sources by turn 2, we need to have at least 18 red sources. Which, if you're only playing 20 lands, that means you can really only side out like 2 spells and 2 lands. At most. I think in dire circumstances, sometimes it went down to 16 mountains, but you can end up seriously getting color screwed. As long as you have access to 2 red sources, you're usually fine. But if you only have access to 1 red source, then you've kind of like played an Archon of yourself, forcing you to only play 1 red spell each turn. So yeah, I mean, but the thing is, since we're playing effectively 24 lands, we can actually take out possibly as much as 4 mountains. And having 12 mountains, 4 Blast Zones, 4 Spikefield Hazards, 4 Valakut Awakenings, it's actually I mean, we will have access to 20 red sources, so it actually won't screw us over as much as you might think. There could even be some consideration to playing all 4 Blast Zones in the main with a more land-heavy version like this, but the main problem there is that in a lot of matchups, Blood Moon is just going to shut it off anyway, so why color screw yourself early on if you're just ending up gonna shutting it off later with Blood Moon anyway. On the other hand, you could look at it like, well, Blood Moon smooths it out and makes it cost red, so it color fixes it. But no, I mean, I prefer bringing in Blast Zone in the matchups where I know the Blast Zone effects is going to be good for the most part. Yeah. So Yeah, rather than have it in the main and randomly color screw me. Because, also again, just because you have 20 red sources, that doesn't mean this still doesn't mean you're guaranteed to have 2 red sources. I still actually have 1 mana hand sometimes, even with 24 lands. So, like, yeah. So, bottom line is, you don't want to necessarily be exposing yourself to being color screwed unless you have a pretty good chance that that the Blast Zone effect is actually going to be useful, which isn't the case for all matchups. That being said, the other nice thing about Blast Zone is that we can take out either Flame Slash or Blood Moon, even if we have literally nothing better to bring in. But if Flame Slash or Blood Moon are straight up dead cards, like for example Blood Moon in the literal mirror, like obviously Blast Zone is better than Blood Moon in that matchup. So that is nice. And that takes us to Relic, and just real quick, that's another nice thing about Relic, is that together with Blast Zone, both of these cards, like I've said before, they do actually always, they are always useful. Relic always has the ability to just draw another card, so it's always like at least like a pseudo-cycling type effect. That also gives you Prowess boosts. And Blast Zone is at least another colorless land, which obviously is not really like where you want to be in the abstract. But if it definitely having just a colorless land is better than like a completely dead card. And you might be wondering, like, how many decks are there that both Blood Moon and Flame Slash are dead against? Well, there's one, and of course neither of these are completely dead in the matchup, but they're both bad. And I think this is. And depending on whether or not they're playing Batterskull, because I think they've kind of moved away from that. I haven't seen it in this deck for a long time, but yeah, Blue Moon. Blue Moon is a classic example of a deck where Blood Moon and Flame Slash are both, for the most part, dead. And if you've got nothing better to bring in, yeah, bring in Relic and Blast Zone. And honestly, Relic is not so bad anyway because you usually place an Outcaster Mage. But yeah, you want to be able to have a card to replace both Flame Slash and Blood Moon. And we'll probably be bringing in Blast Zone, even though Blast Zone is actually not that great against Blue Moon. Obviously, it gets shut off by Blood Moon if they even leave it in, which they probably won't. They probably shouldn't. Because honestly, it has a better chance of color screwing them than us. But it's kind of hard to color screw a 2-color deck that itself is built around Blood Moon. But but ironically, they are actually a tad bit more susceptible to us because all it does is actually improve our lands, whereas it in theory could cut them off of Cryptic mana. If you played early enough, and they can't fetch for more blue sources. But, that's neither here nor there. You want to side out Blood Moon in the Blue Moon matchup, and it is nice that you can side out Flame Slash too, and you can bring in Blast Zone and Relic of Progenitus if they're not playing Batterskull or any other artifact win con type cards. Yeah, so there you go. That's the deck. Let's see how it does. All right.